Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Molly Alawade, and I am the Director of Education here at the American Kidney Fund. Thank you for joining us today for our Kidney Month and Nutrition Month webinar, Kidney Chat, Ask a Dietitian. We will be answering your questions about kidney-friendly eating and also providing tips for stocking your pantry and preparing food during the current coronavirus and COVID-19 pandemic. For those of you in attendance who are health professionals, we are glad that you've joined us today and hope you'll recommend this webinar to the patients you work with. However, as a friendly reminder, this webinar is not accredited for continuing education credits. If you believe that your accrediting body may offer you credits for attending this webinar, we'll be happy to send you a certificate of attendance after today's session. Simply email us at education@kidneyfund.org. Without further ado, allow me to introduce today's speaker, Carolyn Feibig. Carolyn is originally from St. Louis, Missouri, and has been a registered dietitian in the Washington, D.C. area since 2011. She found her passion for renal nutrition when her nephew was born with only one kidney. Currently, she is the kidney transplant dietitian at the George Washington University Hospital. Prior to her current role, she worked for a dialysis company as a dietitian. In her career, she seeks out opportunities to educate the general public about the importance of early detection of kidney disease and the value of a healthy diet for kidney health. Carolyn supports content development and review for the American Kidney Fund's Kidney Kitchen, a nutrition website that helps people with kidney disease navigate healthy eating. In her spare time, you can find Carolyn walking all over Washington, D.C., taking pictures and searching for new and delicious restaurants or farmers markets. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Molly, for having me. And I guess right now my search for delicious restaurants is on hold, right, as it is for everybody in the country. And it kind of walks us right into the next part where it's COVID-19 and living with kidney disease. So there is, this is all new for everyone here. We haven't, lived through a pandemic, and this is a brand new virus for us all. So people are just kind of scrambling, and really the best way to go and find out what you need to do is by going to the CDC, to their website, going to the AKF to their website, going to places that you trust, right? So like DaVita has a good website because everybody who's doing this backed through science, right? The American Association of Kidney Patients, the AAKP, or the Kidney Community Emergency Response Coalition. These are all great places that are going to be coming with you or to you with real science-based, not fear-based education of what you can do to help support yourself and your family through these times while living with kidney disease. Next slide. So really, what are some kidney-friendly foods that you can stock up on? Again, there's a lot of good information, and these are links like to tips for shopping for a 3-day emergency diet, shopping foods for that you can stock up in your fridge and freezer and pantry. It's going to be kind of funny because like when we're going to go through this, we're going to talk a lot about eating fresh fruits and vegetables. But when it comes to emergency time, making sure that you have some staples that are pantry safe and that can stay, food safe out of the refrigerator on your shelf for a long period of time. And it's always just kind of good to have that in your pantry always, because you never know when something like this is going to happen, or when a snowstorm, or now that we're moving into the spring, an electric storm or like a lightning storm, and you lose your electricity. And so having good kidney-friendly staples in your house is important. Canned tuna is good. Low salt or no salt saltines. What else? Like some pastas and jarred like pasta sauce that you can thin out with water, or things like that. Food delivery. Right now, I'm not sure where everybody, this is nationwide. So like right now in Washington, D.C., all of our restaurants are closed, right? But they are delivering to us. So it's like, how is that safe? You know, like hopefully the food delivery guy is being safe. So always, cooking for yourself is more important, is where you know that you're going to get it to be safe. But then we all go out to eat, and doing food delivery. I mean, so choosing foods that are going to be low in potassium, foods that are cooked. So instead of choosing that raw salad, get something that's cooked. Get a dish that it has to be all the way cooked, so that way there is no possible foodborne illness, and things like that. Choosing like chicken instead of beef, because it's just a little bit more on that healthy side, or choosing a hot vegetable but low potassium vegetable dish. How can you get emergency dialysis? That is another great question. That is when emergency dialysis, you always call your dialysis unit first, and they are going to have the best recommendations of how to get you in for your dialysis treatments. They might also tell you hey, we can't get you in right now, so these are some things that you can do. You can really cut back on your fluid. You can really cut back on any type of foods that are high in potassium. So kind of going more to the like just plain rice or buttered noodles, or really kind of stripping down that diet of yours, avoiding protein, because protein has a lot of potassium in it as well. Doing things like that. And then if worse comes to worse, then you have to go to the emergency room. But that is after you have called your dialysis unit, called your doctor, things like that. If you're feeling like short of breath or your heart is racing, those are certainly the times when that happens. But hopefully your dialysis center has reached out to you, or will be reaching out to you in any type of time of crisis, be it a snowstorm, a pandemic, or maybe a tornado or hurricane or things like that. Next slide. So now we're just going to kind of talk about, like, really briefly and kind of quick, how to just basic tips for nutrition and kidney disease. So the thing about kidney disease is there's actually 6 different stages, right? You got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, that are all not on dialysis. Then you have like stage 5 on dialysis, and then you have after transplant. So those are the 6 different kind of stages. So we're going to talk about these in kind of blocks, right? So stage 1 through 3, that's your mild form of kidney disease, where you can really stop or slow the progression, and really your diet can make all the difference. So we always recommend to eat a low salt diet. That is less than a teaspoon a day total. That's not like putting a teaspoon of salt on your food. That's the total amount of salt or sodium you get in your diet. So certainly not adding any salt to your pasta water, or adding any salt at the table. Choosing foods that are, not highly processed. Whenever you eat any type of canned bean, rinse your canned beans. Rinse anything that's coming out of a can. A lot of times your canned foods are going to be high in sodium. Increasing your fruit and vegetable intake. Absolutely. We meaning the Western diet consumers, we need to eat more fruits and vegetables. Half of our plate should be vegetables, and with a little bit of fruit, and then some whole grains and some lean protein. And right now, like when you're on the early stages of kidney disease, just moderate protein intake. You don't need to eat gobs of protein. You don't need to super restrict your protein. Making sure that your protein intake is from nice, good, lean sources like beans, whole grains, chicken, fish, lean beef, and pork. Those are all fine. And then there's some lifestyle recommendations. And these are lifestyle recommendations really for everyone. Visit your doctor regularly. control, and if you have like diabetes, control your blood sugar. If you have high blood pressure, control your blood pressure. Increase your physical activity every day. That doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and, do some crazy CrossFit workout or run a marathon or anything like that. Just get outside for a walk. It's spring. Yesterday was the beginning of spring. Go out for a walk. I mean, we're all cooped up inside anyway. You can get outside and get some fresh air. That's going to be good. And also, like, lose weight if you need to. That means if your BMI is greater than a 25, you could lose some weight. Next slide, please. And then there is CKD stage 4 and 5, non-dialysis. So you're getting more into your kidney function is starting to decline, but that doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want with your diet. Your diet still makes a huge amount of difference. Again, low salt intake. We want you, of course, always to be increasing that fruit and vegetable intake. But this time, you might actually need to think about like, hey, I need to start making some lower potassium options. And that your doctor is going to drive that boat for you, right? Because you're going to go to your doctor. You might start going to them every 3 months, or maybe every month, or every week, and they might check your labs, and they might even mention like, hey, you need to start eating a low potassium diet. That's okay. You can always go to the American Kidney Fund Kidney Kitchen, and they have a wonderful list of different amounts of foods with all the protein and all of the potassium and all of the phosphorus lists. So you might need to make some lower potassium choices with your fruits and vegetables. Also, this is going to sound weird, but we want you to lower your protein intake, and then we really want you to avoid or limit red meat. Red meat can actually constrict your blood vessels, and that can then end up raising your blood pressure and putting more work on your kidneys. So eating a low protein intake, if normally a protein serving size is about the size of the palm of your hand, when you're trying to do a low protein intake, make it for that meal only half the palm of your hand. So just cutting what you would normally eat protein-wise in half, and changing that protein from something that might be like a red meat, like a beef or a pork or a lamb, into something like a fish or a bean or some like skinless chicken. Again, those lifestyle recommendations are really important. Going to your doctor regularly, controlling that blood sugar and the blood pressure, because diabetes and high blood pressure are the number 1 and number 2 reasons for kidney disease. And again, always increasing your physical activity and losing weight if needed. Next slide, please. So now we're at CKD stage 5 on dialysis. And still, what you can eat makes all of the difference. But now we've got some new recommendations, right? So we want you to limit your fluid intake to 32 ounces a day. And this is because when your kidney function starts to decline, and once you've ended up on dialysis, a lot of times your urine output is significantly less or has stopped altogether. And this can put an extra strain on your heart and your lungs by having too much fluid, and it can make your heart work too hard, and it can make it too hard to breathe, and you might end up needing to be in the hospital because you have too much fluid on. This is why we want you to limit your fluid intake to only 32 ounces every day, which is probably, if it were me, would be the hardest thing. And then what kind of fluids you're drinking actually does make a difference. We want you to choose water. It's actually more thirst quenching, and it doesn't have any added calories, and it doesn't have any added phosphorus. And then, sure, sometimes you're going to want a juice or a soda, but that's okay. We just want you to limit that. So choose a low-calorie juice or a zero-calorie soda, and avoid things that have added phosphorus, like phosphoric acid. The major players in that are going to be your colas, but sometimes they might sneak it in somewhere else, like maybe in Fanta Orange or some root beers. Those are, you just got to always read that label. And again, we still want you to eat fruits and vegetables, but you really got to focus on the lower potassium fruits and vegetables. And the Kidney Kitchen by the Kidney Fund is a great place and a great resource for those food lists, like I was talking about. And of course, we want you to limit or avoid added phosphorus. It's hard to find foods that are in a box or a bag or a can or anything that's processed that doesn't have any added phosphorus. So a great way of doing that is looking at your ingredients, and if the added phosphorus is at the front or the top of the list, avoid that product. If it has more than 3 added phosphorus, avoid that product. But let's say you're reading it and it's that added phosphorus is towards the bottom. Okay, that's going to probably be, definitely a better choice than something that has that added phosphorus at the top. And also limiting or avoiding those processed foods, because if it's not processed, then we can't add that phosphorus to it, right? All right, next slide. And again, stage 5, dialysis is really focused on protein. So when you are on dialysis, you need to eat a little bit more protein. Your body, it doesn't sound like your body is actually hard at work when you're on dialysis and your needs are higher. So you actually need more protein. But the type of protein that you eat is important. We always still are recommending lean proteins with every meal now that you're on dialysis. So eggs are a great source of protein, poultry, fish, whole grains, and yes, beans. Beans are great. There's a tip though, because like beans do have a lot of potassium and phosphorus, but so does meat, right? So, or like animal protein, that has a lot of potassium and phosphorus. So if you want to eat beans, that's great, but just don't have any animal protein in that same meal. So it's not like chicken with beans and rice, it's beans and rice or chicken and rice. And you can always go to the Kidney Fund and to the Kidney Kitchen to find out which beans are lowest in phosphorus and potassium. And that way you can see, like, you can make that change, or you can make those different, you can add beans into your diet by doing, kind of following those little tips and tricks. And also there's a lot of recipes in the Kidney Kitchen, and you can even filter that to find ones that have beans and to make it low in potassium and things like that. And again, lifestyle recommendations, visit your doctor regularly. I know when you're on dialysis, your nephrologist comes around once a week and you talk with them and whatnot. So making sure that you have some type of question. If you have questions, write them down, because you know that your doctor is coming on Monday or on Tuesday, and, say, hey, doc, I've got these questions, and making sure that you control your blood sugar and controlling your blood pressure. And these things might change now that you're on dialysis. Maybe you need less insulin. Maybe you need less blood pressure medication. Maybe you need more. It all just depends. And then again, increasing that physical activity, which can be hard when you're on dialysis because it is tiring. But choosing but just getting out and going on a walk, and always losing weight if needed. I just can't stress enough, by being active, eating at home, cooking at home, and doing those things, then you're just gonna naturally lose weight if you need to. If you don't, then your body will keep that weight as well. Go ahead and next slide, please. So getting on the transplant list, this is now my new, favorite topic, right? Because I am the transplant dietitian. And transplant, I think it's great, but there's all these different centers, and everybody has their own recommendations and their own requirements. They're all very similar, but what you really need to do, if you don't live in Washington, D.C., it doesn't matter what my center requires. What matters is what the center nearest you requires. So I think a great way of finding out what centers are near and around you is by going to the Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients, or SRTR. So you can just Google SRTR, and then go to srtr.org, go to their website, and then you type in your zip code, you select kidney for the type of transplant, and it's going to list all of the different transplant units or centers around you. Then you can get their telephone number and you can call them and say, hey, can I talk to the dietitian? I'm curious about what your nutrition requirements are for transplant. Next slide, please. But for the most part, nutrition requirements are pretty standard. It's based a lot on your BMI. Some centers have no BMI requirements. Some centers like mine have a BMI requirement under 40. Other centers, they want your BMI less than 38, and other centers want your BMI less than 35. It's always a good recommendation to have a BMI under 35 going forward, but I mean, it may not be a requirement for you. Also, we want to make sure that your diabetes is in control. So if you have an A1C that is really high, like 12 or 13 or even 9 or 8, some centers might say that that's not good enough. They want your goal to be under 7. Also, if you have any non-healing wounds, a lot of times that could be on your feet. So making sure that you're taking care of your feet and checking your feet and working with your doctor, your podiatrist, or your wound care doctor to make sure that those wounds are healing. We give you these medications that suppress your immune system, and if you have an active infection, that doesn't work. It could actually harm you. Also, your dialysis adherence, right? So do you miss any treatments? Are you cutting down your time? Are you rescheduling treatments, not because of like one time, but it's a lot of times because you're skipping and you're missing and things like that. We want to make sure that you're going to come to the Transplant Institute frequently. After transplant, we follow up with you, and you have lots of doctor's appointments, and you need to come and to the center as you know, your doctor's request. Also, medication adherence. Are you taking your diabetic medication? Do you take your phosphorus binders? Are you taking your blood pressure medication? Is your blood pressure in control? These are all things we are all looking at this in a broad sense. And then, of course, are you physically healthy enough to have a major surgery? So each Transplant Institute has other testing that is required, but these are the nutrition ones. And it's basically, does your BMI fall within range? Is your diabetes control? Do you take your medications? And do you go to your dialysis treatments? Next slide.
All righty. Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for that intro, Carolyn. So now we're going to dig into the Q&A. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. Now we're going to take that time to answer your questions. So let's go to the first question. So I'm sure folks have heard all about dietitians and all the wonderful work that you all do to help manage kidney disease through diet. So our first question is, how do I find a renal dietitian?
That's such a great question. So if you're on dialysis, you already have a dietitian in your center, and they are a great resource, and they are here to help. And I can guarantee you, having been a dialysis dietitian, that I always loved it when my patients would come up to me and say, hey, I would love to have like a talk with you. I really want to improve my diet, or I really want to make this change, or, you know, like, so use them. They're a resource for you. Also, if you're not on dialysis, then there are resources out there for you. So you can go to eatright.org, which is part of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And you just like refine your search by entering your zip code and selecting renal or kidney as what you're looking for. And they'll give you a list of dietitians that have registered with the A&D, with the Academy. And it'll give you a list of the ones that are near you with their contact information. Same thing with the health professionals. You can just www.healthprofs.com, and then you can go in and find a dietitian for renal issues. And again, you do put in your zip code, you select renal or kidney. What you really want to do is be careful, though, making sure that they're a registered dietitian and they're not just what people call nutritionists. Nutritionists haven't had they're not licensed, they haven't had the education or the schooling as a dietitian, and they are not qualified by CMS to do any type of like medical nutrition therapy, which would be something that like a kidney disease would be. And also, let's say you're not on dialysis, and you could always still call your nearest dialysis unit and just talk to their dietitian. Maybe they see patients outside of their dialysis unit. Maybe they have a colleague that does, and they can put you in touch with them. They're a great resource. So you can just Google dialysis centers near me and find that dietitian and ask them. Next slide.
Thank you for that great answer, Carolyn. Now, this is a very popular question. How can I slow down kidney disease?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like what we discussed in those earlier slides. And maybe one of the reasons why I love kidney disease, well, I don't love kidney disease, but I love working with people with kidney disease is because diet really, really, really makes all of the difference. If you're not on dialysis, your diet can influence how fast or how slow you end up on dialysis or not at all. So by changing your diet, by choosing more fruits and vegetables, you do not have to eat only fruits and vegetables. You don't have to be a vegan or a vegetarian. You can have everything can fit on this plate for you if you choose so. Choosing fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, but I do have some vegetarian days or non-meat days. Drinking water. If you are not on dialysis, water should be your best friend. Actually, everybody, water should be our best friend. We should all be drinking, if you're not on dialysis, at least 64 ounces of just plain old good water. Tap water is great for most of the country. You don't need to be buying any type of like vitamin water or alkaline water or anything like electrolyte water. Just plain old water. Limit your intake of added salt and sweets. So those salty chips or the ramen noodles, right? Or sweets like those like Little Debbie Hostess cakes or cookies or pies, donuts, those things that you walk into your office and you're like, dang it, why did they bring that in here? Now I'm going to eat one of those. Don't do it. Put it down. Limiting your fried foods, limiting fast foods, limiting processed foods. So really it's all about taking control of your health through food, maintaining a healthy weight, daily physical activity, and again, managing your diabetes and your blood pressure. A normal blood pressure, your goal is 120/80. If it's higher than that, you've got high blood pressure. Your diabetes, we want your fasting blood sugar to be 100 or under. If you have diabetes, you've got to check your blood sugar. You got to take your medication. You've got to go to your doctor. Those are the best ways for slowing down kidney disease. Let's say you've got diabetes. Limit your refined carbohydrates. Eat more whole grains. Have smaller carbohydrate portions at your meals. Choosing fruit as a carbohydrate versus pasta, things like that. Next slide.
Those are some great tips. So in this next question, I think this is a great opportunity to do some myth busting. So the question is, are there supplements or vitamins that slow down CKD?
No. No, it wouldn't be great if there was a magic pill that stopped these things. If there was, all of the nephrologists would be putting you on this, and we wouldn't have kidney disease. Supplements are not regulated the same way as medications by the FDA. The FDA actually places the stewardship of regulating these supplements and these vitamins on the manufacturer. So, and the only way that they step in is when somebody says, "Hey, this didn't do what it was supposed to do, or this harmed me." That's when the FDA steps in and like can pull it off the market. If you have declining kidney function, actually, a lot of times, if you have any type of underlying health condition, supplements and these vitamins can be harmful. You always, always, always have to talk to your doctor before taking anything, before taking biotin for your hair or whatnot, or vitamin D, or even those things that are, are real nutrients. And then you step out into the range of herbal supplements that, should you be taking turmeric? Should you be taking ginger? Should you be taking this Chinese herb? These are things that you need to talk to your doctor about. There are, in my research for this question and some other questions that kind of filtered into this theme, there was some mention of like some keto analog like for a very low protein diets. I'd never heard of these before. One of them had no scientific evidence. The other one did have some links to some scientific papers, but you got to talk to your doctors about this. That boy, oh boy, I wish there was a quick fix pill, but there's not. Next question. Oh, well, actually, so this is just what the FDA says. These are the guidelines, and I did bold and italicize the part where they tell you that, this means that these firms are responsible for evaluating the safety and labeling of their products before marketing to ensure that they meet the requirements. But then the FDA is responsible for taking action against any adulterated or misbranded dietary supplement after it reaches the market. So it's only afterwards, and then somebody complains, that is when the FDA steps in. Next slide.
Thank you so much for that explanation. So in our next question, we know that whole grains are constantly praised for their health benefits. So are whole grain foods always better for people with CKD?
The word always, right? Always and never. Those are two words that I never use, but on pump. No, whole grains are great, and the kidney diet in the past was like, don't eat whole grains, you can't do it, it has too much potassium, it has too much phosphorus, they're too dangerous. I used to call it the Wonder Bread diet, white rice, white pasta, white bread, all of that jazz. Well, that's not how it goes anymore. But you do have to ask yourself some questions, and it's all about potassium, because phosphorus, when we're talking about phosphorus, you always have the option of taking your phosphorus binders. If you're going to eat a high phosphorus meal, maybe taking an extra phosphorus binder. And then also phosphorus. So and also with like whole grains or grains in general, your body only absorbs about 40% of the natural occurring phosphorus. So no longer do we think the grains are all that much or all that detrimental when it comes to phosphorus. So then we've got to worry about the potassium. So these are the questions you need to think about. Is your potassium running high? Has it been running high? When was your last dialysis treatment? Was it yesterday? Was it today? Or are you going into the weekend, or have you just come back from the weekend? If you're going into or just at the end of your weekend, eating lower potassium is just really good in general. But if you look over on the other side, you'll see that a lot of these grains aren't that high in potassium, right? Millet and bulgur. My favorite is barley. So, these are all very low, for a half a cup, low potassium foods. Portion does matter, right? So if I'm eating a whole cup of barley, now it's up to 146. milligrams of potassium, which isn't so bad, but still. But like if you ate a whole cup of quinoa, that could be that then puts it into 300, milligrams. But luckily, whole grains, they fill us up faster because of all the fiber and all the nuttiness and goodness of them. So you can certainly add in some whole grains into your diet. Personally, I don't eat rice anymore. I use barley. I don't use couscous because that's just white pasta. I either use bulgur or quinoa. Millet is a fun little. It's this little like hard kind of like. It kind of looks like a seed. It's not though, but it's this little pellet, tiny, tiny, tiny little guy, but it adds some fun texture into it. Having oatmeal for breakfast is a great way. Barley and oatmeal do a nice job of lowering your cholesterol as well. Next slide.
That's some great advice. Now, as you mentioned earlier, protein is important for people living with kidney disease. So what is a healthy amount of protein for the different stages of CKD?
All right. It gets confusing too because each stage has a different protein requirement, right? So when you are when you're in the early stages of kidney disease, so CKD stage 1 through like 3B. I think that we have the next slide will have like a chart of this. Yeah, there we go. So stage 1 through 3A, they've kind of taken stage 3 kidney disease and broken it into two like subgroups. Really for the protein. So like stage 1 through 3A, there's really no change in your protein requirements. And I know that we in the United States don't use a metric system, but the medical community does. So there's no change in your protein requirement. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram, right? So, and on the Kidney Kitchen website by the AKF, it teaches you how to convert pounds into kilograms, but really 1 pound is 2.2 kilos. Nope. 1 kilo is 2.2 pounds. So let's say you are 150 pounds. You just divide that by 2.2, and then you're 68 kilos. So multiply that by 0.8, and you need about 54 grams of protein a day. So that's not that much. So I mean, like right now we're all thinking that we need a lot of protein, but like 3 ounces, which is about a palm size or a half of a chicken breast, is 21 grams of protein. So you eat that, I mean, like that's almost half your daily requirement in one day. So then you've got your non-dialysis stage, later stage kidney disease, so stage 3B to 5, non-dialysis. Then you really do need to do a decreased protein amount. So we're going to still take that 68 kilo person, and now we're going to multiply their diet by 0.6, and now they should only be having about 40 to 50 grams of protein per day, which is less than what they were doing before. But you still need some protein because what we don't want, because your body needs protein. It needs it for your muscles. It needs it for all sorts of cellular functions. So what we want to do is just decrease the amount, but still give your body enough protein for it to do its daily activities. And then when you're on dialysis, you actually need more protein. So, and it kind of depends, not kind of, it does depend on what type of dialysis you're doing. If you are doing the peritoneal dialysis or PD at home at night, you actually need more protein than somebody doing hemodialysis. So you would be on the upper end of this, so 1.3 grams per kilo. And then if you're on hemodialysis, about 1.1 gram of kilos per kilo. So that 68 kilo person, if they're on hemodialysis, needs about 75 grams of protein a day. And if they were on PD, they would need about 88 grams of protein per day. So you're just increasing, and that's why lean protein is so important, because it does have calories. And then when you're trying to manage all of your potassium levels and your phosphorus levels, that really becomes a play. And then after transplant, you just go back to normal protein requirements, 0.8. Sometimes if your transplant has been working, as you've had it for a long time and you've started to notice a decline in your kidney function by like an increased G, or by an increased like creatinine and a decreased GFR, then maybe cut back on some protein after transplant if your, kidney function is going down. Any question, or not questions, but next slide.
Great advice. So our next question is, for vegetarians who are living with kidney disease, what are some kidney-friendly sources of protein besides meat and chicken?
All right, that's a great that's a really great question. And here's the deal. It used to be like you have to eat animal protein, and animal protein is the best, and things like that. And honestly, I mean, it just kind of like it's definitely harder to be somebody like a vegan, where you're not going to eat any eggs or any fish, but you can certainly do it. You might need to go into some protein supplements for that. I know like Ensure and different places have plant-based protein supplements. But let's say you do eat eggs or fish. Eggs, I mean, I can't say enough great things about the humble egg, but you could have eggs in the morning, or obviously you have them in the morning, but you can even have them at night, and have like a frittata. Eating fish is making sure that you're choosing like a lower potassium, because fish is actually pretty high in potassium, and a lower mercury fish or shellfish. There's lots of recipes that in the Kidney Kitchen that you can just Google, or not Google, but like you can set your dietary preferences for vegetarian or vegan, or you don't have to at all, and you can filter it by low, medium, or high protein. But yeah, there you can certainly eat a more plant-based diet than we once thought now, which is great. Next slide. And I kind of broke down different items based on how much protein, potassium, phosphorus, and then calories, right? And for the serving size. So you can even see the difference between just a chicken breast and chicken thigh, right? Chicken thighs, now granted it is a 4-ounce piece versus a 3-ounce piece. So there is a little, but there's more potassium, and there's more phosphorus, and there's more calories. And then also like black beans that are just like straight out of the can have a lot more potassium than like black beans that have been boiled. White beans, so the great white northern bean has a lot of potassium. So that's not something that you're going to want to choose. You're going to want to choose a lower potassium bean. A veggie burger, like a Morningstar soy veggie burger, is going to have a nice amount of like protein base versus like a half a cup of black beans. And then they're not too high in potassium. So those are some other good sources, but you certainly always want to read those ingredients. How much sodium does it have? Does it have any added phosphorus? Now there is these plant-based burgers, like Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger, which has a good amount of protein. They don't tell you how much phosphorus they have, and it's not in the USDA website. Because I Googled, or I went to the USDA website to see, and it wasn't in there. And it has a fair amount of potassium, and also some of them have a lot of like sodium. So you want to always look at the facts panel. And then let's see now, lean beef. You can see the difference between the amount of protein in like a 90% lean beef versus an 80% lean. And then also you can take a look at the amount of potassium in these different versions. So that's interesting. So always making sure that like portion size and how much. Eggs, I think eggs are great quinoa, like grains do have some protein, and so like if you pair your grain like the barley with beans, you're going to make that a complete protein. Canned tuna is a great source that can be low in potassium and phosphorus, and it's interesting because there's like light tuna or white tuna in a can, and the light tuna has less potassium and phosphorus than the white tuna. So you got to like read those ingredients again always. And then salmon, which I mean is a delicious and it's a go-to staple for a lot of people, but it is pretty high in potassium. But there is becoming more and more and more options out there for people who are wanting to eat less meat, who want to do a more plant-based diet. I do always recommend like trying to do it more with the whole food versus these processed veggie burgers and things like that. Just because it doesn't matter if it's a processed meat product or a processed plant product, it's still processed and it's still going to have a lot of additives that could drive up the potassium and phosphorus and sodium. Next slide, please.
So going off of that question, we also know that veganism is growing in popularity. So the question is, how can I maintain a plant-based renal diet?
Right. And I mean, you most certainly can, and it's kind of through portion control. It's through could you advance the slide? Sorry. So you've got to really think about some things, right? And pre-dialysis, how often do you need to go to your nephrologist? So what are your potassium levels and how is this all happening? So like, has your nephrologist ever recommended you to be on a low potassium diet? Because when you are with kidney disease and veganism or vegetarianism, it is difficult because a lot of these, like the nuts and the legumes and the beans and the lentils and the vegetables and all these things, they're all really high in potassium, right? So you really have to make a conscious effort and know, like, hey, if I'm going to do I need to follow a low potassium diet? Portion size is a huge deal, right? You want to, like, if you're going to eat like those white beans, right? If you ate an entire cup of those white beans, that would be 1,000 milligrams of potassium. That's way too much for somebody who needs to be on a potassium restriction. It's not too much for somebody who doesn't, so that would be a good thing to do. Choosing whole foods versus pre-made foods, right? So eat beans versus a highly processed bean burger. And again, you're just going to need to look at the label because some processed bean burgers are going to be better than others. And so you just have to, really count the number of ingredients if that's a good strategy. The less ingredients means the less processed. Look at how much sodium is in there, things like that. And remember, just because it's plant-based doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. Potato chips are plant-based. I mean, I love a good potato chip, but potato chips or those veggie chips, those things, those fried snacky things, labeling is really getting into vegan, organic, plant-based, made with plants. I think if it's trying to oversell it, then maybe you want to avoid that product. Choosing whole grains versus refined grains. So choosing the barley, the quinoa, the brown rice versus white rice and white pasta and white bread. Like I was saying about couscous, little did I know that couscous was actually just white pasta, right? And then I was doing some reading a long time ago when I was like just my first new adult, and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to cook and I'm going to do all this. And I realized that couscous was just white pasta. No wonder I liked it so much. So I started trying out different ways of choosing a whole grain to make it more healthy. When you're on dialysis now, some of these same questions apply that you need to think about by following a plant-based diet. What was your potassium last month? Was it in range? If it was in range, and really I want to say if it was under 5, then you're pretty good and you're pretty stable, and you can pretty much, eat these beans and these grains and these vegetables. You really want to avoid the high potassium vegetables and fruits. some of the major players I've listed: avocados, artichokes, potatoes, any type of potato, right? Sweet potato, cooked spinach. Like a raw spinach salad is fine because if you think about it, you can the amount of spinach that you would eat raw is going to be a lot less than the amount of spinach that you eat cooked, because spinach wilts down, and then all of that potassium is going to condense into a smaller, more manageable part. That's why raw spinach is okay versus like cooked spinach. Cantaloupe, bananas, tomatoes, you really want to start avoiding those things if you're trying to do a more plant-based, vegan, vegetarian lifestyle on dialysis. Also, you got to think about what your protein levels are. If your protein level was low, if it was under 3.8, always the goal is 4 and higher. But if it was under 3.8, then maybe adding in an egg or maybe some fish or like some tuna salad or something like that, just to kind of help boost it, because our body actually absorbs and processes protein, vegetable protein and animal protein a little bit differently. Same thing like with iron, and our body uses animal protein a little bit more efficiently. Doesn't mean that you have to eat animals versus vegetable protein at all. But if your albumin is a little bit on the lower side, you certainly want to maybe think about that. Talk with your dietitian and see if she has or he has has some suggestion. And again, portion size, right? It's all about portion size and choosing whole foods versus pre-made foods. Next slide.
All right. So we know that people living with kidney disease have to manage various nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, protein, sodium, fluid, and that is a lot to keep track of. So what is the best way to track my nutrient intake?
Yes. Trackers are good, right? And so like the American Kidney Fund in their kidney kitchen actually has a potassium tracker. I think you see it on your screen right now. But sometimes people don't want to write everything down, right? And you don't want to do all that research. But if you just reading your food labels, choosing, and you know that like what you're choosing, and you're making kidney-friendly recipes, and you're practicing portion control, and you're planning, then that's going to be really good for helping you manage. And then you might not have to write down everything or track it all in the phone. And you want to be you want to be a little bit cautious when you're using any of these phone apps. I think they're great, and they help keep people accountable for what is being what's being said, or what not said, but for what you're actually like eating, if you're logging it every time, and that sometimes really does help. But using these apps and thinking that there's so many options, right? So maybe you chose this burger versus that bean burger, and one bean burger says that it's 200 milligrams of potassium versus the other one, or a portion size. And so there's a little bit more of a guesstimation or guesswork that goes into these apps, and so you could be lulled into a false sense of security. But if you're choosing kidney-friendly recipes, if you're practicing portion control, if you're planning your meals and your snacks all to be kidney-friendly, that is really your best way of tracking and knowing what you're doing and following the right path. Next question.
That's a great explanation. So someone else asked, having a daily water allowance is hard. Are there any workarounds?
Gosh. Yeah, man. I think that I could probably do the diet restrictions, the beverage restriction, the fluid restriction. It would be the hardest for me. And so I always try to think about, like, if it were me, how would I do this, right? So no, sorry guys, but the limit is still 32 ounces. So that could equal 4 8-ounce glasses or 1 32-ounce glass. You got to figure out what works best for you. I think if it were me, I would cheat if I had the 4 8-ounce glasses, and I'd be like, oh, a little bit more won't hurt. So I think if it were me, I would choose 1 32-ounce glass. I would fill it up with cold water, and then I would know that that's what I've got for the entire day. And don't forget, like, ice also counts as your fluid. Anything really that's liquid, so soups, popsicles, Jell-O. And Jell-O is not liquid, right? But it's liquid at room temperature, so that counts. So there are some tips and tricks that can kind of help, but no matter what, I mean, it's 32 ounces, and you might just be thirsty, and I hate that that's an answer, but so some of the tips and tricks, right? Freeze fruit. So like if you freeze some grapes or you freeze some apples or you freeze some peaches and you kind of chomp on those when you're feeling thirsty. Sucking on like sugar-free hard candy, chewing sugar-free gum. Those are all ways to kind of like stimulate that your saliva glands, right? And then it makes your mouth less dry, and so then it makes you feel like you're less thirsty. Don't eat salty or sugary fruit foods. Like sugar makes you thirsty as well. So, and same with salt. So don't do that. Avoid those added sugar foods, added salty foods. Stay cool. When you're outside and it's hot, it makes you thirsty. Let's say it's because it's becoming to be about summer, and now people go and they work outside. So you've got to do things like wear a big hat, maybe possibly wet a towel and freeze it, and then wear it around your neck. Run cold water over your wrist to help cool you down if you're outside. And also choosing caffeine-free beverages, right? Caffeine dehydrates you. So choosing something that's caffeine-free, so like decaf coffee or like a non-cola drink or water, really choosing water. Water cools you down the best. But it's just super difficult, and it all is about your self-control, and I feel for you guys. I don't know. Next slide, please.
So we have a very interesting question here. This person asked, why are grapes okay as a low potassium fruit, but raisins are not?
I love this question. I love it so much. So it's all about volume, right? So a serving size of grapes is 10 fresh grapes versus a serving size of raisins, which is 1/4 of a cup, right? You have to think about it. So like 10 grapes is 94 milligrams of potassium, but it's the same thing like with that spinach question, right? Or not question, but like example. We've now taken these grapes and dehydrated them. And so 1/4 of a cup of raisins, how many raisins are actually in 1/4 of a cup? Way more than 10, right? So it's going to be 300 milligrams of potassium. So any type of dried fruit, that fruit is going to be smaller. And it's all about volume and portion, right? So if you ate 10 raisins, it would probably be about 94 milligrams of potassium. But a serving size of raisins is not 10, it's 1/4 of a cup. Also, like another thing about like kind of like when you go with anything, like bigger the flavor, the less you need. So raisins do pack a punch. So if you want to put some like raisins or something like that in, or dried cranberries or something like that into a food, just you got to use less, but they're still going to give you a big wallop for that flavor. Next slide, please.
Well, that was a great explanation. So this person asked, if my labs are within range, can I be flexible with my diet?
Yeah, man, absolutely. These recommendations are for the general, right? So like we want to make sure that you keep those labs within range. So we want your potassium to be in between a 3.5 and a 5.5. Really under 5, it would be best. We want that phosphorus to be in between a 3 and a 5.5. We want to, so you can kind of add in some of your favorite foods if your diet, if your labs are within normal range. But let's say your labs all of a sudden come back and your potassium is high. Well, that's not the time for you to be adding in, like having a slice of tomato on your sandwich or something like that. And really the two most acute problems for people on dialysis is high potassium and too much fluid. It can happen quickly, and they can have dangerous consequences, even deadly, right? Too high potassium can cause your heart not to beat the right way and can end up causing a heart attack. You can go into cardiac arrest. Too much fluid can infiltrate into your lungs, and you could become short of breath, and you could maybe end up on some type of mechanical breathing. So I always recommend, like, if your potassium is over 5.0, and I know in dialysis we say that you can go up to a 5.5, which great. But if your potassium is over 5.0, stay away from any of those higher potassium foods, and just try and have a 2,000 milligram potassium daily intake. And also, let's say you want to have like a cheat day, right? Let's say your potassium is in range, and you're like, okay, sweet, I really want to have some high potassium food. I'm going to use tomatoes as an example. I really want to have some tomatoes. It's summertime, and there are some beautiful tomatoes out in the farmers markets. I want to have some. So you have to think about, when are you going to be eating these tomatoes? Don't do it going into a weekend. Don't do it right after the weekend. I think the best time to do it is on your second dialysis of the week. So let's say you do dialysis Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Do it on a Wednesday, because now you've had nice, good cleaning on Monday. Then you've had your cleaning on Wednesday. So Wednesday evening would be a good time to have, not in a lot, but to have a good potassium, food. So like tomatoes. You don't want to do it on Friday, because now you've got Friday after dialysis, Saturday, Sunday, and you don't do dialysis again until Monday. Same thing for like the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday folks, right? So you'd want to have your like potassium cheat on a Thursday. And really, you can never cheat when it comes to fluid. I know that sometimes people want to, like on the weekends, on their Friday or their Saturday, will say, hey, I want you to take off more. Well, that puts a strain on your heart too if we dry you out, and that makes you more thirsty. So really just sticking to that 32 ounces, and actually on the weekends it's really more so like a 24 ounces of fluid. Next question.
So as you mentioned earlier, Carolyn, high blood pressure is the second leading cause of kidney disease. So this person asked, how can I lower my blood pressure?
Yes. I love I love questions like this, because again, it's all about food, right? So lower your sodium intake. Here's the deal. Like, let's say you don't have high blood pressure. If you're not taking any medication for it or something like that, then eating no more than 2,300 milligrams of salt, which is only 1 teaspoon, is important. Let's say you are diagnosed with high blood pressure and you're taking a blood pressure medication, then really you should be eating less than a teaspoon of salt. So really it's no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium. That's really hard to do. Personally, just don't buy salt. Don't salt your pasta water. Don't put salt on the table. Come up with your own type of like in-house seasoning, or you could use Mrs. Dash. That's great. Choosing fresh and frozen vegetables. They do such a great job of helping reduce inflammation and for just being all around good for you and for your body. They're going to help lower your blood pressure if you consistently eat fresh or frozen. Frozen is just fine. Vegetables, because if your diet consists mainly of vegetables, you're not eating these salty foods or these, red meat does raise your blood pressure because it constricts those blood vessels. So choosing whole grains. Whole grains help lower your cholesterol, which also helps free up some space in your blood vessels. So that helps your blood pressure. Fiber is just really good for your entire body. Limiting added foods with added salt. And then increasing your daily physical activity. And again, I can't stress enough, it doesn't have to be like you have to go to the gym. Go on a walk after dinner. It can be a stroll, maybe it's more of a brisk walk, but just doing some type of physical activity every day is super important for everything, but especially when it comes to your blood pressure. Next question.
Those are some great tips. So this next question relates to gout, which is caused by high uric acid. So the question is, how can I lower uric acid naturally?
All right. Certainly by eating a low purine diet, right? So just some basic things that you can do. Eat a low purine diet. I've listed foods that are high in purines. So you want to avoid those foods that is on the right side of your screen. If you're overweight, that means if your BMI is over 25, you should lose weight. You need to manage your blood sugar. Again, if you have diabetes, make sure your blood sugar is in range. You want to decrease your daily stressors. Stress can lead to gout flares. So getting a full night's sleep, trying some meditation or some yoga, choosing water. Water helps kind of like dilute the uric acid that can be in your body. Now, if you are on dialysis, then you can't drink a lot of water, but you still should be choosing water instead of other things. And avoiding alcohol, especially beer. Those are, they have purines in them as well. And then adding fiber into your diet. Barley and oats. Now, barley and oats are really high in a certain type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Beta-glucan is really great when it's in your gut, and it absorbs your cholesterol, and it probably also absorbs these purines that are the uric acid when you eat it, right? So then instead of your body absorbing that uric acid, you're just going to poop it out. Also, vegetables, high fiber helps you. The less time things are in your gut, the less you absorb. So the more regular you are, the better off you are. These are foods to reduce gout flares. Some of them may work for you, some of them may not work for you. But really, apples, cherries, tart cherry juice, yogurt, really dairy just in general, limes because of the vitamin C, barley and oats, green tea. That beer should not be there. That beer should be on the list of high purine foods. So I apologize for that. So beer is not it for you. Then basically foods to limit. Fish and shellfish are high in purines. That includes scallops, pork, turkey, cauliflower, green peas, mushroom, dried beans, and beer. Those are your high ticket purine foods that you want to, if you're having a gout flare, avoid. Next slide, please.
That was some great advice. Now, Carolyn, you mentioned that diabetes is the number one cause of kidney disease. So this person asks, how can people with diabetes adjust insulin to balance their CKD diet?
Well, number one, your doctor and you should be working on adjusting your insulin. I certainly don't, nor should any non-medical professional, really non-doctor or diabetes educator should be talking to you about how to change or dose your insulin. But you can make some diet changes that will then help lower your insulin need. And then you can work with your doctor, say, hey, doc, I'm going to be making some changes in my diet, so let's start looking at my insulin needs. And ways to do that is by limiting the amount of carbohydrates you eat in a meal. Now, I'm not saying to not eat carbohydrates, because our carbohydrates are actually our body's preferred source of energy for our brain. So carbohydrates are very important. They have a lot of B vitamins, which actually in dialysis you need. They have a lot of fiber, which also in dialysis you need. And they, and they taste good, right? So, but here's the deal. 15 grams of carbohydrates equals 1 carbohydrate serving. And so this is where math comes into play. And that's kind of a bummer, but, and you really have to be a label reader. So 15 grams of carbohydrates equals 1 carbohydrate serving. We want your carbohydrate servings to be whole grains or vegetables or fruits, and also increasing your daily physical activity will also help. Because, think about it, blood sugar is your energy. So the more you move, the more sugar you're going to use, and the less insulin you're going to need. But again, that is a thing for you and your doctor to discuss. And also you should be checking your blood sugar every day or more than once a day, as recommended by your doctor. And then you should write it down and track it so that way you can show your doctor and say, hey, how should we adjust my blood sugar? I've made these different diet changes and have increased my physical activity, and now I've noticed X, Y, and Z. So just an average recommended carbohydrate servings per meal. So remember, 15 grams equals 1 serving. So for breakfast, you should have about 2 to 3, lunch 3 to 4, dinner 3 to 5, snacks 1 carbohydrate serving. So what is 15 grams of carbohydrates, right? That's 1 slice of bread. It is a third of a cup of beans or pasta or rice. It is 1 small bagel. So if you think about the bagels that we get nowadays, it's a fourth of a half of a bagel, right? So if you have a top and a bottom half, you take off the top half, right? And because that's where all the good stuff is, and you cut that in half. That is what you get. That is 15 grams of carbohydrates. It's like 1 apple, 1 medium-sized apple. So there are plenty of resources online that if you type in carbohydrate servings, you can go and it'll give you a list of a whole bunch of things. Also, if you're on dialysis, you can ask your dietitian and she can give you a list of foods that equal 1 carbohydrate serving. All right, next slide.
Wonderful. And this is our last question, which is, where can I go to learn more about nutrition?
Well, you can go to my favorite place, which is the Kidney Kitchen by the AKF. I just am floored by all the stuff that they have there. They have these amazing recipes. They have that you can filter by low, medium, high potassium, low, medium, high sodium, low, medium, high protein. You could do gluten-free, you can do vegan, you can do vegetarian, you can filter all those things. Or you don't have to put on any filter, you can just scroll. They've got these videos that are chef-led that show you how to cook things and show you the kind of just kind of give you the basics of how to do different things. They've got this potassium tracker. They've got these great food guides, which are in the process of being updated to the most current USDA values. Then they also have, I think, maybe also because I helped create it, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think that they have really good nutrition information, and it goes over what to do for CKD stages 1 and 2, CKD stages 3, 4, 5, on dialysis, after transplant, just normal, basic, everyday healthy eating. They've got tips and tricks in there on like what's a good grocery list look like? What kind of cooking supplies should you have in your pantry and things like that. And it's award winning. I don't know if you guys know that. Well, you may not, but it has won 2 awards, and I just couldn't be more excited. And this is my go-to for any type of kidney nutrition. All right, that's what I've got for you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. We really appreciate all of your expert advice today. Now, this concludes today's webinar. The webinar was recorded and will be made available for viewing on our website, kidneyfund.org/webinars, within the next 1 to 2 weeks. We will have another webinar next month. Visit kidneyfund.org/webinars for more information and to register. When the webinar closes, please do not close your browser window. You may see a pop-up saying that the webinar has ended. Please close that pop-up and proceed to the webinar evaluation survey. Your honest feedback will help us make our webinar program the best it can be. Thank you for joining. We hope to see you again.